Let's talk about the Bible of the Space Marines, the Codex Astartes. In my first video here, I talked about what exactly Space Marines are, and I think it's about time that we discussed how they operate as well. The Codex Astartes, written by the primarch Recruitment Guilliman shortly after the Horus Heresy, outlines the general order of battle and tactical doctrine for Space Marine chapters, and was designed to prevent another civil war. Most chapters obey the spirit of the Codex, if not the actual letter, and a sizable number of them are treated as gospel, adhering to it with dogmatic rigidity. So what exactly is the Codex? Well, in the wake of the galaxy-spanning destruction wreaked by the huge Space Marine legions during the Horus Heresy. By the way, isn't it wild that the entire heresy was over in like 10 years? Anyway, in an effort to prevent future conflicts, Guilliman decreed that the legions of Space Marines, the largest of whom numbered around 250,000 Astartes, should be broken up into chapters made up of no more than 1,000 warriors. Predictably, this went down like a lead balloon with many of the other primarchs, though the Khan and Corax both saw what Guilliman was trying to do and went along with it, and eventually almost all of them accepted it as necessary. Going off on a quick tangent, the initial inspiration for Guilliman to split up the legions came from Aenid Thiel, an ultramarine sergeant and all-around badass. It was also Thiel that caused ultramarine sergeants to wear red helmets. After the initial conflict of the Battle of Calth, Thiel organised the surviving Ultramarines forces into small independent groups called the Red Marked, who were responsible for eliminating the forces of Wordbearers that remained on the planet and on the other worlds of Ultramar. This idea of Space Marines operating as smaller, rapid-strike planetary assault forces would be developed by Guilliman and formed the backbone of the Codex. Another important limitation that the Codex placed upon the Astartes chapters was on how quickly they could create and train new recruits. With the near-constant conflict of the previous centuries with the Great Crusade and later Horus Heresy, the need for fresh recruits meant that some legions rushed to create new Astartes without proper screening and selection, exacerbating the gene flaws that the legions suffered. In an effort to prevent this, the Codex decreed that the genetic banks used to create Astartes organs should be carefully monitored and tested, while the initiates themselves should undergo stringent trials of suitability before they were accepted to join the ranks of the chapter. As a final safeguard, the Adeptus Terra were tasked with setting up and maintaining genetic banks to produce and store tithes of gene seed, ensuring that normal humans and not Astartes remained the true rulers of the Imperium, with them alone having the power to create new chapters. However, the Codex wasn't only about limiting the strength of the legions. It also served as an outline for the ideal tactical doctrine and organisation of the new chapters. Originally, it dictated that a chapter should be split into 10 companies, each of 100 Marines, with a captain, apothecary, standard bearer and chaplain for each company. The first company was the Veteran Company, the only company to use what few Terminator suits the chapter may possess. The 2nd through 5th companies were battle companies, split into 6 tactical, 2 assault and 2 devastator squads of 10 Marines each. The other companies were reserves, with the 6th and 7th made up of entirely tactical squads, the 8th of assault squads, and the 9th of devastator squads. The 10th company was a little different, consisting entirely of scout squads and often used as a scouting or guerrilla force in order to give the chapter's neophytes combat experience. Since the return of Guilliman and the introduction of Primaris Marines, which by the way I love, I know a lot of people still don't like Primaris for whatever reason, but I personally love the design. This scheme has been revised slightly. In addition to being led by a captain, now each company contains 2 lieutenants as subcommanders. However, the updated guidelines allow for up to 20 squads of 5 warriors per company, with auxiliary warriors sometimes being reassigned from the reserve companies to the battle companies for particularly heavy fighting. Furthermore, tactical squads have been redesignated to battle line squads, assault to close support, and devastator to fire support, allowing for more flexibility of loadouts. So that's how they're organised. But how do Space Marine chapters actually fight? Good question, I've got no idea. Mostly kidding, but also it was really weirdly difficult to find a proper source for this that didn't directly contradict another book or codex entry. I've done my best, but here is where I'm really relying on you guys to correct me or add details in the comments. In general, Space Marines are used as highly mobile shock troops, relying on drop pods or teleporters to arrive without warning and do immense damage in a very short time. This allows them to demoralise the enemy, take out their leadership, and capture strategic targets at the beginning of a battle, leading to quick victory against a faltering opponent. The chapters that rigidly follow the Codex Astartes to the letter are referred to as Codex compliant. these Marines used the Codex as the model for their organisation, identification markings, and tactical doctrine. Understandably, the chapters that follow the Codex the most dogmatically tend to be of Ultramarine gene stock, as their dad wrote the book. However, many chapters do not adhere so rigidly to the Codex patterns. I should mention that Guilliman himself intended the Codex as a guideline, rather than the borderline religious work that it became, updating and revising it wherever he could. I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the video, but I forgot. With the passage of time, some chapters have strayed from the letter of the Codex, introducing new variations specific to their own cultures and histories, while remaining broadly faithful to the principles. These are generally a lot more interesting than the purely Codex-compliant chapters, although I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise that I think that as a Blood Angels fan. Speaking of which, the Blood Angels generally adhere closely to the Codex, though the Red Thirst and Black Rage led to some necessary deviations from the Codex, such as the Death Company. Another group of chapters that deviate from the Codex are the Dark Angels and their successors, who draw upon the military traditions of the Order of Caliban to organise and refer to their officers, with this terminology and hierarchy replicated in most of their successors. There are also some chapters that simply ignore the Codex, such as the Space Wolves and Black Templars. The Space Wolves have an excuse, as the only second founding chapters that they originally attempted to create suffered from excessive gene mutations and were destroyed. The Black Templars don't have an excuse and don't bother trying to hide it. Split up into various crusade fleets, each with their own organisation, tactics and heraldry, the Black Templars are the largest of the Loyalist chapters, with around 8,000 Marines. And that was a quick video covering the Codex Astartes. Maybe not the most interesting thing in the world, but I have struggled to find a proper source laying out the organisation of a chapter in an easily understandable way in the past, so I thought I'd take the chance to make one myself. Please leave a comment with anything I've missed or you want to add to, or with any video suggestions you might have. Like, subscribe and all the rest, and I'll see you in the next video.